welcome to Manage This, the podcast by project managers for project managers. Today we're going to jump right in because we have a lot of conversation with our guest, Jacques Barrault. We are talking about an adventure of organic chocolate, coffee, wine, and a few other products. And so it's a good one to talk about. If your morning coffee, your evening wine, or your favorite chocolate bar could come with an adventure across the high seas without leaving a carbon footprint, would that not be a much more pleasurable taste?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm intrigued.
Today we're setting sail on a remarkable journey with Grand Sail. It's a company that's providing sustainable shipping, founded by brothers, Jacques and his brother Olivier. And their vision was blending renewable energy with delicious craftsmanship, transporting coffee and chocolate across the Atlantic Ocean using wind-powered cargo ships. But let me tell you a little bit more about Jacques first. He worked for nearly 10 years in marine renewable energies, where he was in charge of important projects in a maritime context. He became involved in the Grand Sail Company in 2015. As a specialist in project development, organization, and financing, he is the co-founder and CEO of Grand Sail, and he manages the company on a daily basis and ensures the financial management of the group.
One of the things that Jacques really relies on are experts, specialists, and I know for me in my project management career, I had to build strong relationships with those key experts on my team, and Jacques gives us a lot of insight as to how to do that, how to trust others.
Yeah, we've done sustainability projects before. We do like to bring you novel, inventive ideas. And just looking back, we can go right back to episode 86. If you haven't listened to that one, it was by Doc Watson, and he's using technology to save rhinos in Africa. That was one of my favorite projects that we talked about.
And then locally, closer to home here in Athens, Georgia, episode 165 was about recycling. And that was Catherine Shane and her organization. And I think it was an app called CERT. Can I recycle this? You can use that to see if there's a recycle center near you for the object you're trying to figure out.
It's always exciting to hear about amazing projects. And I'm sure you've heard us quote before from one of our favorite podcasts, which was the Ocean Cleanup with Henk van Dalen. That was episode 106. They were cleaning up the ocean, and today we're talking about some gentlemen and their team that are sending products across the ocean and keeping it clean as well. So grab your favorite cup of coffee, a piece of chocolate, or a glass of wine and join us for the conversation. It's all about innovation, the future of sustainable shipping, and adventure on the open seas. Hi, Jacques. Welcome to Manage This. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you. Nice to talk to you.
We are so interested in this project. I think it was one of our instructors sent us an email and told us a little bit about what he had discovered, what you are doing. So can you start at the beginning? Tell us what inspired you and your brother to launch Grand Sail.
Well, actually, me and my brother, Olivier, twin brother, I have to say. So we were working together in the offshore wind for approximately 10 years. And in 2010, Olivier had this weird idea to think about the way to reduce the carbon footprint of the maritime shipping. And even today, when you want to do it, there is no better solution than a mast on the sail to push a boat without any fuel. So that was the basic idea at the beginning. How could we build a kind of cargo sailing ship that would be efficient enough to almost kill the carbon footprint of the maritime shipping? That was the fundamental idea of the company.
So you guys had both, you have a science engineering background. You've been doing all this wind generated offshore wind, and you're looking at it going, hey, wait a minute. We could have an impact on the cargo industry as well and shipping. So that's impressive. Yeah.
And with the wind on both activities, offshore wind, we produce energy with the wind, and using a cargo sailing ship, we also use the wind to push.
Yes.
That's the link.
Right. So can you walk us through, I know you've evolved, you started with almost like a prototype and then built a larger ship and then a larger vessel.
Yeah.
But kind of walk us back to the beginning of how did you come up with this idea of, okay, this is the route we're going to do, and this is the kind of the layout of the ship that we want to build first.
Yeah, because in 2010, when we thought about the way we could build this kind of vessel, the next question is always the same. How are we going to finance such a vessel? I mean, the first prototype. And actually, we discovered that it could be interesting to link these maritime shipping activities with the food and process activities, just in order to load internally a big part of the vessel. Because when it comes to finance a vessel, the question is always, how can we efficiently load the vessel? And by creating an activity around the coffee and the chocolates, we were then able to bring back our raw materials from Latin America, mainly, in order to load the vessel ourselves. So that was a way to be more reliable on the financial aspect of the project. So we didn't make the mistake to start with a vessel. We thought that it was much more interesting to start by mastering the products. So we started in 2013 with a coffee roasting activities because it was the easiest product to handle, actually. I have to say that at this time, we didn't have any knowledge on how to make coffee and how to make chocolate. Frankly, that was totally crazy at this time. So we had to hire some specialists.
Yes.
And our main question at the beginning, okay, can you learn us how to make excellent coffee? And then can you learn us how to make excellent chocolate? So we started, as I said, in 2013 with a coffee, followed in 2016 with the chocolate factory. I have to mention that the chocolate is a product much more complex compared to the coffee.
Yes, very.
But thanks to many helps, we succeed to produce the right quality, as it was, of course, important for us, with a full organic products, of course. All was organic, the coffee and the chocolate.
Jacques, so as you're pointing out, eventually you want to have a sailing vessel that takes advantage of this wind-powered generation. But the first thing you had to think about was the scope. And I think for so many of our project managers, it's the same thing of like, I know where we want to go, but first I've got to figure out exactly, what does that product look like? What makes financial sense? What will consumers purchase? That kind of thing. It's so interesting to me that you guys went back to, you landed on coffee and chocolate. And then eventually, okay, now we have something, we have a business that we can now build the sustainable energy vessel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a step-by-step approach.
Yes.
And that was the only way to achieve the whole story. To obtain the vessel, we had to start with the coffee and the chocolate.
Right.
Probably if at this time we decided to be just a maritime shipping company, probably we would not succeed to do it. The only way was this kind of incredible link with the product and the vessel. And everything is under the same brand. I mean, the chocolate and the coffee are sold under the Grand Sail brand, and the name of the vessels, the first one was Grand Sail, the second Grand Sail 2, and so on. So for the final customers, when he tastes chocolate or coffee, he's tasting more than the product.
Yes.
He's also tasting the maritime adventure, all our environmental values, social equity, and so on. This combination, we discovered it generates a very, very powerful brand, this kind of specific business model. It's working.
And it's just coffee and chocolates?
So far, yes, but we are also thinking about the rums. So we think about olive oil. And I mean, all these kind of product that give pleasures. Yeah, it's the way we want to develop the company, indeed.
I'm sure there's a lot of planning. There's a lot of forethought that's gone into exactly where you go and the routes you take. So can you just describe a bit about that?
So our ocean is the Atlantic, definitely. We wanted at the beginning to play on the Atlantic because this ocean is very, very compatible with sailing. I mean, all the weather forecast, all the routing teams were used to play in the Atlantic. Of course, when you're living in France, and especially in Brittany, it's the west part of France, and when you look at the sea on the west, somewhere you see the Liberty statue. You see New York.
Yes.
So we said, it could be interesting to export some typical French product from France to New York. It would be a good idea, and especially good French wines and French product, I mean, in general. And by doing this export, we would then be able to get down to Caribbean Sea, just to load our primary materials for coffee and chocolate, such as green coffee and cocoa mass, and bring back this primary material in Brittany to transform in coffee and chocolate. So as you can see, it's a kind of loop, but this loop is most of the time in opposition with the wind. Usually when you want to go from France to New York, you go south and then you use the wind coming from the east and you go then back to America, but it takes time. It's a long way. On our side, we didn't want to spend that much time, so we decided to go almost straight. But you are upwind. I mean, it's a very strong conditions for navigations, but that was the only way to cross the Atlantic efficiently between France and New York. And with the right partners and the routing, you know what is a routing? A routing team is they are inland and they are guiding the vessels through the Atlantic, integrating all the data from the satellite, all the weather forecast, in order to find the best way to cross the Atlantic by avoiding too much wind or at the opposite where there is no wind at all, of course. So it's a kind of mixed, and it gives a lot of efficiency and the average cruising speed. Thanks to the satellite, we have to imagine that 1 century ago, when all the cargo sailing ships were in operation, there was no satellite, no weather forecast, nothing. And at this time, the only way to cross the Atlantic was to use wet fingers. You see?
Which way are the winds blowing?
Yeah, exactly. And that was bold to do it like that. But today, we have many more solutions to be much more efficient compared to this time. So it's, again, today, when you want to use a cargo sailing ship, it's much more efficient to do it today compared to 1 century ago. Thanks to the technology, I mean, the sails, the ropes, everything, electronic systems, and of course, the routing teams that guide the vessel. I mean, 24 hours a day. It's incredible.
Yeah, because even though it is a sailboat using an old technique of sailing, you still got all that technology in the modern day. Helps that
exactly
get you across.
Yeah, we have the satellite communications, we have all the radars, IS to see all the other ships. I mean, it's very convenient to sail today compared to a few decades ago.
So, Jack, in terms of timing, when the ship leaves France and arrives in New York, how does that compare? Is it like twice as long as a typical cargo ship, or maybe less than that? How long of a trip are we talking?
Not really. Actually, sometimes it's faster.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It depends, of course, on the weather forecast and on the classical weather we have during the crossing. But our record is 14 days to make the crossing. And most of the time, it's something like 16, 18 days, and sometimes 21, but it's usually between 16 and 18. And that's about the same duration compared to a classical vessel.
Wow.
So it's not really a question of time. It's just the way we transport. Thanks to the efficiency of today's technology. Once again.
Yeah. What size crew do you have? I'm sure there's also a lot of competition. People want to say, hey, can I come?
I want to be on it.
Can I join?
Yeah. Actually, we have 2 crews because when the boat is in operation, you have one crew that is resting inland and the other one is on the vessel. And the size of the crew, it's 8 seafarers, which means that we have 16 seafarers for Grand Sail 2 that is operating across the Atlantic. And for the first vessel, Grand Sail 1, it was at this time when this vessel was crossing the Atlantic, it was 4 seafarers.
Okay. And describe for our listeners the capacity of 1 versus 2, because I know you really grown that.
So, as I mentioned, when we thought about building this company, we wanted to build a first vessel, but with a reasonable size in order to limit the financial risk, mainly, and also in order to learn how to operate this kind of vessel, to learn how to handle the merchandise, to bring all the goods in good shape to the other side. And we decided to build this first schooner type vessel with 24 meters long, 72 feet long, and with a loading capacity of 50 tons, which means approximately 30 pallets on the hull. Fortunately, we did this first version because we learned so much details.
Yes.
And in the maritime activity, a detail is not a detail. Actually,
it's huge.
Yeah, that's always very tricky sometimes to discover that such a system is not working as expected. Yeah, so this first vessel cost 2 million euro and was enough for us at the beginning. And then we decided a few years later to build Grand Sail 2. Grand Sail 2, it's a 52 meters long schooner type vessel again, with a much higher loading capacity because we switched from 50 tons for the first vessel to 350 tons for the second version. So it's a much longer, it's a twice longer, but when a vessel is twice longer, it's always twice wider and twice higher. So it's in 3 dimensions, which means that the hull capacity is, of course, much bigger compared to the previous version. And then we started to operate Grand Sail 2 in the middle of March 2024. It's 1 year ago, exactly. As the vessel is longer, the average cruising speed is higher, which means that you have more capacity, you can go faster, it's more reliable, it's more comfortable. I mean, everything is better. And the cost of transportation is lower. And that is the classical financial equation in all the maritime activities is to have the bigger vessel possible to reduce the transportation cost.
Right.
Except that when you want to almost kill the carbon footprint, you have to be reasonable on the size of the vessel. Imagine that if we decided to build a very, very big vessel like a container ship, let's say 300 meters, 400 meters, it would be totally impossible to put some very high mast and huge sails on this kind of vessel, which means that the capacity to reduce the carbon footprint would not be efficient.
Yeah.
So we have to be reasonable on the size, and that's why we decided to create Grand Sail 2. It's 52 meters long and no more, because at this time the technology was not ready to do a bigger version. And that's why we discovered something like 1 year ago that it was possible to use a new techniques. It's a solid sail technology. It's a technology that use rigid panels instead of flexible sails.
Yeah.
It's not a tie shoe. It's a really like a plate. You know?
Yes.
And this kind of rigging allows us to design a much bigger surfaces of sails. That's why we decided to create Grand Sail 3, to design it. And this version is again twice longer. So it's 110 meters this time, more than 300 feet. And the surface of sails on this third version is 43,000 feet squares. So it's absolutely huge. And we have 3 masts this time. And it's a container ship this time. We are not loading pallets, we are loading containers directly.
Yeah, that's a big change.
Yeah, and it's a big difference.
Yes.
Which means that for us, Grand Sail 3 will be a vessel much closer from the habits of our logistic customers, will be again cheaper and the cost of transportation. It will go faster again, even compared to Grand Sail 2. Will be more comfortable and so on. I mean, it's a big improvement. The step by step. You see Grand Sail 1 and then Grand Sail 2 and one day Grand Sail 3 and so on. It's a step by step approach as it costs a lot of money, of course. But yeah.
Grand Sail 3, what is the anticipated launch date for that?
We expect to operate this vessel by the end of 2027.
Yeah.
Just the time to set up the detailed design and to build it, of course.
And there's clearly a demand for the products. If you keep getting bigger and bigger, people are definitely into buying the products, which is really good. Yeah. What are some of the biggest challenges that you faced?
Yeah, our value chain is much more complex than any conventional company, and especially for a small size company like us. So at the beginning, we had to be very careful on the way we digest the complexity, which means that we had to start with a step-by-step approach again. We started with a coffee that was definitely the easiest product to handle. I mean, we had to learn how to master the quality. 2013, then in 2016, the chocolate. Even if the chocolate is a much more complex product that we imagine, it's very hard actually to understand exactly the way we can build the right recipes. The way we use what we call the crystallization of the chocolate is something very, very important for the final quality. But well, we made it, and only at the end we decided to build the first vessel. So the management is we have to be very cautious on the way we drive the company and the way we integrate the complexity years after year.
Yeah.
And it takes time. And we succeed just by being patient. Yeah.
And it sounds like you have an attitude of let's try things and we'll adjust our plans if they're not working. I think of the complexity of, okay, we're going to manufacture coffee and we're going to transport coffee beans. Now let's step it up and do chocolate. You pointed out the process of actually creating that final chocolate product is very complex, a lot more complex than coffee. So how did you decide, okay, at what point do we stop the process and move it closer to our home base so that we can have more control of it? I think a lot of project managers think through the same thing of, okay, there's a complex part of this process that I either am going to trust the offsite capabilities of the team to do it there, or I want to have it closer to our headquarters or home base. How did you guys go back and forth on that decision?
We decided at the beginning to find the right specialist, just to be sure that we would be able to understand exactly how the process had to be executed, even what kind of machine we have to buy to produce the right coffee and the right chocolate. But also we had to hire, our chocolate specialist, we had to hire the whole team. And we made a lot of tests at the beginning without selling anything, just testing.
Yep.
And I remember some days where we were something like 6 people from the Grand Sale team around a table, just testing chocolate tabs. And
sign me up for that.
Yeah. It was the fun part of the job, but we had to do it like that. We didn't want at this time to externalize the testing.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to handle this important part of the recipe selection by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we were 6 around the table, and we used to test one recipe at one time, of course. Let's say a dark chocolate with a tea inside, or any other peanuts or some stuff like that, and with several percentage of integration. And we just ate, and the result was, what is the recipe that you prefer without any more description? Where do you find the best? What kind of equilibrium do you have the more pleasure? And all our recipe has been chosen like that. And even after many years, we didn't make any mistake. And today the recipes are exactly the same compared to 7 years ago.
That's terrific.
But because we were 6. I was not the guy, like the boss. I'm testing, I'm choosing. No way. Yeah.
This is my choice.
We were always 6 or even 7 people.
Uh-huh.
And, that's the best way to avoid all the mistakes.
Right. And there's buy-in with those 6 because you all had a hand in it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm.
So our management is kind of distributed management. I don't like the pyramidal management.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
Yeah, kind of a top-down approach.
It's not working actually. We have to find the right specialist. Once again, it's very important to find the right people. And when I hire somebody, I'm giving the responsibility of his job, and I'm giving the keys. And that's important to work like that, especially when you have many jobs to handle at the same time. I manage the maritime shipping, the chocolate, the coffee. It's complex. So I have to give the responsibility to my team. Absolutely. In order to be more lucid, to understand exactly what's going on without too much complexity on my head.
It's very much managing a project, what a project manager does.
Exactly. We were lucky, me and my brother, to have enough experience before building Grand Sale, actually. Probably that if we decided to build Grand Sale, let's say 20 years ago, probably that the result would have been
painful. Expensive?
Less, more painful, more expensive, and
with age comes wisdom.
That's right.
What were you doing before? What was your career?
Before Grand Sale, the offshore wind, and before the offshore wind, I was working in IT, technology, electronics development. So it was mostly some engineering developments for digital TV, all the telecom networks and everything. But I learned at this time how to develop a project step by step. So somewhere I said that I'm the specialist to go from a PowerPoint slide to the real product.
Yeah.
Because most of the time we see some incredible slide, but the hardest part is to transform the idea in reality.
That's where the project managers come in to get things done. Yeah.
Exactly.
become
Yeah.
reality.
So, have you faced resistance, like from the traditional shipping or logistic industries? Have other people kind of looked at your project?
Yeah, we have a resistance, not on the project itself. I mean, all our customers say, wow, your vessels are incredible. The way you are transporting goods, it's just perfect. I mean, the service is 100% perfect. And thanks a lot. And it's a great adventure. But there is an issue. Most of our customers don't want to pay more compared to the classical maritime shipping.
Yes.
And frankly, it's very hard to compete against the efficiency of the petrol.
Sure.
Because the way we are usually transporting, I mean, using big container ships and so on, we don't pay the pollution, we don't pay the underwater noises, and we don't pay the climate change. So it's almost free to transport goods today. On our side, when it comes to design and build a cargo sailing boat, you pay the rigging, you pay a reinforced hull because the hull has to take all the effort from the rigging. You pay the keel. You pay for much more items compared to a classical vessel. And just to give you an example, a Grand Sail 2, it's 52 meters long, costs approximately 10 million euro. The same vessel with the same capacity using only an engine would cost 5 millions. So yeah, it's more expensive to be compatible with the environment. But some customers don't want to pay more. It's a kind of financial habits. I mean, they used to pay almost nothing for decades. So when it comes to pay more, sometimes kind of tricky. But we work very hard, to convince them that the normal price is on our side. So we just take time to explain, and usually at the end it's working. But it's a tough job. It's a tough job. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say, and of course we're going to put a link to this in the notes in the transcript. But the website does a great job of communicating all points, from beginning to end, until the coffee is in my coffee maker at my home or the chocolate is in my mouth. But it lets the customer and even your business partners see the vision behind the company and the reasons where these trade-offs are made and the vision that's really driving this. So you've done a great job in that. That's something that project managers have to do, is communicate the why behind what this effort is they're doing. I think you've done a great job with that.
I used to work with what we call the planetary limits. I don't know if you know the donut theory. It's a specific diagram that is describing all the planetary limits we have to deal with. And there is 9 limits, actually. And there is only one limit amongst the 9 limits that is dealing with the climate change, which means that we have 8 other limits that we have to take into account, such as biodiversity, such as the land use change, the freshwater uses, and so on. And the Grand Sail strategy is directly linked to these 9 limits. So it's not only the carbon footprint. It's much wider than that. And it helps us to set up the right strategy, and just by being compatible with what the environment is able to handle from 8 billion people on the earth.
Right.
We are producing pollutions. We are producing so many bad news for the environment that it's time to be careful, definitely.
Yeah, that's true.
Talking about structuring your project, you are coordinating food production, shipping operations. It's very complex. How do you manage just that complexity in your day-to-day?
On the maritime shipping activities, it's mostly a question of hiring the right seafarers, hiring the right captain, and so on. These guys know exactly how to handle a vessel like that. And especially we have some specialists on the sailing management. So it's something like a seafarers that would be usually dedicated to the engine. And this guy is dedicated to piloting the wind engine, the rigging. And this kind of rigging is much better, is much bigger compared to a classical engine, but it's a very tricky and a very high knowledge that is absolutely mandatory in this kind of vessel. So for the maritime activity, the complexity is managed by hiring the right seafarers. That's the only way to succeed.
That's the importance of having the right people on your team.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the Grand Sail communication help us. We don't have that much issue to hire the right people.
Yeah.
But we have to be careful. Sometimes you have some seafarers that said, okay, I'm totally able to use your vessel. And at the end, it's not the case. So,
it's a risk.
It's a risk. So we have to be very careful. We have to check the curriculum vitae just to see if everything is all right. But we have some very high level, very high skills seafarers.
Yeah. And as you pointed out on the food production side, the same is true. You
Exactly.
hire experts. That's the interesting part to me too. One of your roles is to be that integrator, that communicator with the food production team and the transportation team, and make sure that here's our estimate for how much, how many tons of, let's say, coffee beans we're going to have on this date at this location. And as we get closer and the ship's getting closer, let's keep revising that, getting as accurate as possible, because that impacts how they're going to load, and that'll impact their ability to get things turned around. So I imagine it puts a lot of emphasis on communication for you.
We have to master the whole value chain.
Yep.
From the loading to the maritime transportation to the chocolate transformation and coffee transformation. It's a long chain, and we have to be synchronized on all these elements. And it's kind of tricky, but year after year we learned, and today it's working. Especially this year, it's sometimes very hard to find the right primary materials because of the cost of the green coffee and the cost of the cocoa is very, very high due to the climate change. It's a direct link with the climate change. And sometimes it's very difficult to find the right quantity. I remember even sometime we are not able to load the quantity we would need in the vessel, just because there is not enough green coffee or not enough cocoa mass.
Yeah.
So it's tricky, but I believe it's temporary, even if the climate change will last again, probably 1 century again. It's definitely an issue for us, but we have to adapt. We try to adapt our logistic strategy all the time to be able to produce enough, and especially our growth is kind of high. It's something like 20% every year. So it's tricky. Challenging. Yeah.
That's a good problem to have. Yeah.
You have stakeholders in New York and in Latin America. How did you get the buy-in from these places? How did you secure that contact and to be able to convince them, like, this is what we want to do, you want to come on board? How did you win over your stakeholders?
At the beginning, we went directly in New York. Yeah, for the wines, especially for the French wines at the beginning. We had a lot of appointments on the restaurant just to discuss, to try to feel what was a market in New York. And it takes time. It takes something like 3 years to understand the market and to find the right wines to sell in New York coming from France. Then we have done the same thing at the beginning to understand what kind of green coffee, what kind of cocoa we would need to produce the chocolates. So we went in Dominican Republic, we went in Peru, Mexico, and so on, just to learn and to understand. And it cost a lot of money at the beginning to do it. But it was absolutely mandatory for us to learn and to understand the whole value chain and to find the right primary materials. The quality of a coffee and the quality of a chocolate is directly coming at the beginning from the primary material quality. And especially when it's organic. There is less choice when it's organic. And hopefully, now we have a guy that is working with us full time. It's Javier. This guy is working in Ecuador, and it helps us to find the right products. And he's full time for Grandside. And he's speaking Spanish and so on. He knows the coffee and chocolate. He's the right specialist for us.
That's good. As you expand, again, you have this balance of trying to be as eco-friendly and efficient as possible, but also wanting to have a sustainable business. And then, 20% growth year over year. That's difficult. That's a good problem, as I mentioned, but it's still difficult.
It is.
So how do you continue to keep this balance and stay true to your mission of sustainability?
Actually, the size of Grand Sail 2 has been designed in order to be able to bring all our goods until 2030. So we have the time to feed this vessel completely. And we know that by the end of 27, we will have Grand Sail 3, so it's not going to be an issue.
Yeah.
But yes, the size of Grand Sail 2 was indeed, we had to design it just to be sure that we would be able to bring 100% of our primary materials using these vessels only, with only one Grand Sail 2.
Right. Oh, wow.
It's 350 tons. I mean, the navigation is 5 loops per year.
Okay.
Which means that the import capacity of Grand Sail 2 is 5 times 350 tons. So it's huge, actually. And it's far enough for us. So, yeah.
That's good. Yeah, that's some high-level math and forecasting. That's fantastic. Yeah.
So you have wine on the ships, you have chocolate and coffee. Is there anything else that you transport?
So we used to bring wine, excellent French wines from Burgundy, Bordeaux, and so on. It's very, very high quality. We also used to bring some luxury product, perfumes and bags for women and clothes sometimes, pharmaceutical product sometimes, chocolate from Grand Sail, of course. And I mean, it's somewhere on what France is able to do.
Yes.
The best product from France are transported with a Grand Sail 2. And I used to say, we want to transport goods that deserved to be transported. And it's a new way of thinking about the maritime shipping. When we see the absolutely huge container ship, most of the goods that are transported by these vessels are a poor quality product, very cheap product, made in very poor social conditions. Do we really need this kind of transport? No. And the only way to reduce the carbon footprint of the maritime shipping is, of course, to produce some specific vessel, like the vessels from Grand Sail. But we also need to reduce the amount of goods transported across the road. If we don't do it, there is no chance to achieve the final goal of the International Maritime Organization that says that by 2050, we will have to be at zero net emissions.
Wow.
Zero net. It's not 50%, it's a zero. So, yeah, we have to work on the vessel itself using sails and all the low carbon solutions, but we also have to reduce the amount of merchandise. And to do it, the first solution is to relocalize all the product that can be relocalized. It's very important. The first step. The second one is to transport less, transport better, as I said, and especially for the maritime shipping. The third important step is to produce a better quality. The quality of the product is important. A product, an object that will last much longer, an object that can be repaired, and a project that can be recycled at the end.
Right.
And for the food, it's using mostly organic product. And the fourth step, it's for all of us, the consumer. We have to shift from an economy based on the quantity to an economy based on the quality. Because when you are buying a high quality product, you will buy less product. Instead of, just an example, instead of buying 10 t-shirts made in a poor social conditions and in a very poor quality that will be almost destroyed after 2 or 3 washes for 50 euros, you can buy 2 t-shirts, high quality t-shirt for 50 euros also. But this t-shirt will last much longer and will generate less pressure on the environment. So it's a shift between the economy based on the quantity. We have to shift to the quality.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And that's about it. It's simple, but it's very tricky because we're all used to buy more and more. Thanks to the marketing and so on. So it's a total change of habits and the way we're consuming. And it's going to take a very, very long time before, everybody will shift to this new way of buying. It's a mind shift indeed.
That's a good way to describe it. So what qualities have been most critical in managing this really complex and pioneering business that you and your brother have created?
The quality was probably the most important value at the beginning. Because, the quality has to be everywhere. It's the quality of the product. It's the quality of our transportation, maritime transportation, the quality of our specialists, and so on. So that's the first important strategy we wanted to include in the Grand Sail company. And the next one is to develop a company that is in the right equilibrium between the 3 pillars.
Yep.
The first one is the financial sustainability of the company. It's important to make profits. If you don't make profits, the company won't be sustainable. So definitely the first pillar, the most important, is to have a profitable company. But those profits have to be addresses to the environment and the social equity first. And maybe at the end, to me and my brother and all the other financial partners. But the equilibrium of the three pillars is definitely the key. And I believe that the company of this new century, the 21st century, will definitely have to be compatible with this equilibrium. Because so far, for decades, all the company has been built only on the financial value.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this incredibly high growth of the financial value generates so many issues on the environment and even on the social equity. It's not sustainable. That's it.
Looking at the project yourself, what has been the most rewarding thing for you?
To see our products on the shops and to see people testing product and say, yeah, it's great.
Okay.
Oh, congratulations.
Mm-hmm.
I was not coming from the food and process activity. So the first time I discovered my chocolate tabs on the shop, it was incredible. Oh, great. This is my product.
Yeah, that had to be a breakthrough.
And frankly, the second surprise when I see the first vessel, Grand Sail 1, sailing.
That had to be amazing.
Yeah, totally amazing. I mean, the real beginning of the adventure. And it was in 2020 when this vessel had done the first crossing between Saint-Malo in France, because our main harbor is Saint-Malo. And Saint-Malo is an incredible harbor with a lot of history. And I remember this day, it was a very sunny day, very cold, but very sunny day. And the ship left the Saint-Malo harbor with New York as a destination. And the seafarers arrived in New York 3 weeks later. It was -5 degrees with a snow. And it was during the COVID.
Yes, right. 2020,
there was nobody on the streets.
Yeah.
But well, that was the adventure. And we have some video, some footage of this crossing. It was the real beginning of the adventure at this time.
That's amazing.
Have you taken the voyage yourself? Have you been on a few trips?
No, not yet. I mean, I made a few trips from Saint-Nazaire in south of Brittany, but I don't have the time to cross the Atlantic. It's a shame. I will do it one day, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to pilot the company during this time. The seafarers are piloting the vessel. And one day, I promise, I will go in the US in a low-carbon way. And especially with the satellite, I mean, I can work. I can be connected in the vessel.
So finally, can you direct our audience where they can find out more if they want to find out more about your company?
Yeah, if they want to have all the information on Grand Sail, we have a website. It's www.grandsail.com. Grand Sail in one word with a French and English version. They will learn everything about the adventure.
Can they buy your products online?
Yeah, we also have a website. It's grandsailoverseas.com that allows the American people to buy all the chocolate tabs from Grand Sail.
This has been such an inspiring conversation. When I look at what you and your brother and your team have done, it's just remarkable. We've had a lot of fun with this podcast talking through other sustainability initiatives, and this one is right there at the top. It's like thinking about how to transform the shipping and cargo industry and take advantage of wind power. This is so inspiring. Thank you. And thanks for sharing some of the challenges and some of the thoughts that went into this as you guys learned as you went, because that's what you've really done. That's amazing. Well done.
Yeah, the future can be positive. We have many issues to face, but with the right ideas, it's possible to do much better compared to what we're doing today. So, yeah.
That's it for us here on Manage This. Thank you for hanging out with us today. It's always a pleasure to have you along for the ride. Don't forget, you can visit us anytime at velociteach.com to subscribe, catch up on past episodes, or read the full transcript of today's show. And now it's time to reward yourself. You just earned free PDUs for listening. To claim them, head over to velociteach.com, click on Manage This Podcast at the top of the page, then hit the Claim PDUs button and follow the simple steps. We'll be back soon with more inside stories and strategies to help you master the art of project management. Until next time, keep your projects and coffee cups filled to the brim. Stay curious, stay inspired, and keep tuning in to Manage This.